How's it going, everybody? Welcome to The Observer. I hate TNA, and they're so stupid. What do you think, Dave? Minami Toyota, Japan, 5 stars. UFC, Wait a minute. That's the wrong show. No, this is the Wrestling Roundtable radio show. Welcome. I'm the host, Eric Santamaria, and we want to hear your thoughts and opinions during the course of this show. The number to call is 347-857-4647. Tuesdays at 11 p.m. on blogtalkradio.com. Go Fight Live, and you can simulcast us yourself, too. Get the embedding code for the player on blogtalkradio.com/Wrestling Roundtable. 11 p.m. on the East Coast, 8 p.m. on the West, and whatever god-awful hour in the morning it is in Europe. I know we've got some listener in Germany right now, so thanks for listening, and hope you enjoy the show. Now, before I introduce the panel, want to make it clear right off the bat here, you want to stick around to the end. It's going to be a very stacked show. We got a lot to talk about, but at the end, got a little announcement for everybody, so hold tight for that. Before we get to the rest of the panel, want to introduce Will Brooks, who is in our chat room every Monday night during Raw, because today is your birthday. Happy birthday, Will.
Thank you, Eric. It's my 26th birthday. I'm in a bar in Philly right now. I have a shot of Jack Daniels in my hand, ready to go. I'm sorry I won't be with the rest of the show tonight, but I hope you guys have a great show. I'll listen to it on YouTube in a couple of days. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot. What happens when you combine the words gratuitous and salacious?
Cretaceous.
Cretaceous. I thought that was the last period the dinosaurs were alive.
That's Cretaceous.
Anyway.
I would give a great definition of Cretaceous on the video. You should know that, Eric. Come on.
And the video in question is the Battle of the Wills, which is still currently going on, and we will talk some more about that later because they were battling over some of the latest pay-per-views that have happened. Introducing the rest of the panel, our correspondent in Chicago, radio panelist Coriander Ake. Hello, Corey.
Hello, Eric. And before we get started, I want to send out a shout-out to 90s Aid, who I met at the Ring of Honor show this past Saturday. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Fans of the Wrestling Roundtable, you're referring to Saturday, were at the Ring of Honor tapings in Chicago Ridge, Illinois, but we'll talk about that a little later on. Introducing to the panel, the now blue belt in BJJ, Rodney LeConte. Hey, yo, Rod.
Hey, yo, Eric. Hey, yo, everybody. How's everyone doing?
We're doing all right, waiting for you to show up. What's some of the things you've been up to, Rodney?
Well, I just got done shooting a music video for an artist, Wisecrack, out of Newark, and I'll be posting that up shortly. And, yeah, like you said, just got my blue belt. I'm competing in grappling tournament on Saturday in Red Bank, so I'm prepared for that.
Is that Grappler's Quest?
No, it's Grappler's Challenge.
Oh, okay.
Excited for that. Video shoot soon, and trying to get my own projects whenever I have the time.
Absolutely, and good luck on Saturday. This is just one form of martial arts, grappling, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, and that all goes into mixed martial arts, which is what we're going to talk about now because, like I said, 2 big shows for UFC and a big deal. But let's go in order. UFC 133 the other weekend at the Wells Fargo Center in Philadelphia, formerly the Wachovia. UFC coming back to the Wells Fargo for the first time in about 2 years. I was really surprised that it took them 2 years to come back to Philly, but I want to relate that before we get into the specifics, Rodney, of how we just talked recently about, is UFC overexposed? Is it long-term not so healthy? What's going on? Because on one hand, you had UFC Rio coming up next in a few weeks, sell out 74 minutes. We just had 55,000 people, one of which was me, in Toronto. UFC took over the town of Toronto. There's international expansion. They're getting clearance in all these different states. Only a handful now don't have clearance. We're seeing a lot of first-ever shows in different states. The return to another country, Brazil, for the first time in a long time. So you'd think they were doing well, but then the ratings for Ultimate Fighter this season weren't doing well, and I'm not up on a lot of their buy rates, but with the new insurance that they're offering the fighters this year, it seems a lot of them are taking advantage of it because there's been a lot of card shuffling, a lot of injury bugs biting, but it seems like they've got a better fall lineup, if that is the appropriate term, and, of course, the pay-per-view king, Brock Lesnar, set to return next year. But like I said, things have been looking a little different. And though we talked about it last time, Rodney, I got to see it in person because I thought to myself, let's see how strong the UFC brand itself is. Because as opposed to when they had Anderson Silva and a title fight with BJ Penn defending the welterweight belt against Kenny Florian, this time they didn't have the star power. Now, of course, they wanted to do John Jones and Rashad Evans. That got changed around multiple times, and we ended up with Tito Ortiz with just a couple weeks to go. But even sitting down in the building, Rodney, I could tell it wasn't nearly as full as last time. There were a lot of scattered empty seats. The numbers in the press conference afterwards revealed were about a 6,000-person difference, and the gate seemed to be about half of what they drew 2 years ago. What do you think about how they did numbers-wise? Is this an indication that maybe they're getting a little too overexposed? Did Spike TV not even care because of the ratings to let them go as they have seemingly done?
I think the numbers aren't anything that people have to worry about. Not every show could be a Toronto show or a Rio show or sold out daytime Las Vegas. So they are going to have their own shows. Like, not everything's going to have the hype. That's why you have like your superstars, your St. Pierre's, your Brock Lesnar's, your Randy Couture's, like people like BJ Penn, like people like who draw. I mean, I don't think the numbers mean anything. If you look to other sports, I mean, you know, the NFL preseason games outdrew baseball, and no one is talking about that baseball is going to die or baseball is being overexposed. We're just really in the beginning of a new era in UFC. I really don't think anyone should pay attention to the numbers. I think MMA fans are too needy. I mean, it's not every show is sold out or ratings are through the roof. I think MMA fans start to question, what's going on with UFC? Like, it's nothing to worry about. They know what they're doing. The numbers didn't do so high. That's great, but the past three shows have been phenomenal. 133 versus 132 have all been great shows from top to bottom, and I don't see them being in any trouble at all.
Plus, as much as we've talked about when we covered the WrestleMania documentary, the true story of WrestleMania, how much when I watched it back I admired the vision and the genius of Vince McMahon as a promoter to come up with the concept of WrestleMania and to have the vision and the will to live it out. Dana White has done the same thing for mixed martial arts, and that's why I'm a big admirer of his. I don't agree with 100% of what he says. In fact, I disagree with him a lot. Just today, before we went on the air, actually, about an hour ago, I read how he was saying Yushin Okami was the best Japanese fighter ever to come out of Japan, and I was like, oh, really? I wonder what Sakuraba thinks about that. But anyway.
If Vince McMahon had the mentality, if Dana White had the mentality, as like if you go back to like the new generation era, like their ratings, and then they were doing low numbers. If they had the mentality as if, oh my God, are we overexposed? Maybe we should do it every Monday night. And then a few years later, they were doing phenomenal numbers. As a promoter, it would be bad for business if he thought like that, and I think he just knows what's ahead, especially signing the new deal.
Well, about the Okami thing, he's also not going to sell or put over somebody who's in another promotion anyway. So I understand that he's trying to build up his own brand, sell tickets, fine. But it's just when he starts crossing, let's say, the logistic line, the logical line of some guys like not giving Fedor credit and blah, blah, blah. So I disagree with him here and there. But point being that when you listen to him, you could hear his passion for the sport. And people say, oh, no, he's all about money. It's just UFC. He doesn't care about MMA. Please. MMA fans should be thanking Dana White and UFC for mixed martial arts in the same way that wrestling fans should be thanking Vince McMahon for wrestling. And they're both far from perfect human beings. Keep it real here and give credit where credit's due. But like we said last time, Rod, it's a sport. He thinks it should be on the level of NFL, MLB, NBA, etc., and maybe this Fox move is the next step. But let's get into the show itself, UFC 133. On the pre-show, another innovative idea using Facebook to air prelims, but then we go on to Spike TV, and the first fight I wanted to get your opinion on was the light heavyweight bout between Alexander Gustafsson and Matt Hamill, because Gustafsson beat Hamill in the second round with a TKO victory with punches, but we found out after the fact that Matt Hamill had his last fight there in Philadelphia, and he wouldn't even be the last retirement we're going to talk about tonight. But this is also the same year as Randy Couture. And Fedor, people were talking, well, two Pride guys, Fedor and Crow Cop, after their last losses, people were talking about retirement for them because that seems to happen every time they fight now, or lose now. But, yeah, Couture earlier this year in Toronto, as we talked about that show, and now Matt Hamill goes down, and sorry to see him go. I think Matt Hamill's a real inspiration for sports, not just UFC, but I also love that trailer for that Hamill movie. I hope that gets some sort of national release because that's even cool for giving a deaf actor a chance, which you never really see. So I'm sad to see Matt Hamill go, but Gustafsson got the victory, no argument there. But I wanted to hear your thoughts on that fight and Hamill, his career, and what he means.
Gustafsson looked really good, really beating Matt Hamill in the striking department. Matt Hamill couldn't get any takedowns, and I feel like somehow his wrestling has changed. He doesn't have the same drive. He kind of just bends down and goes for it. If he doesn't get it, he gives up way too easily. You know, he used to just have that drive. Like it wasn't even the Matt Hamill that we saw go against Tito Ortiz, where he was taking Tito down. And Tito's wrestling is a strength. As far as him retiring, I guess it's his choice. You know, if he feels like there's other things in life he needs to do. He's still a young guy in shape. He's in his lower 30s. He's always going to be one of a kind in UFC, and I'm sure that if he ever wanted to come back, that Dana White would always open the door for him.
Moving on to the main card in the welterweight division, I wanted to talk about what ended up being the, let's call it the sports entertainment moment of the night, because in the welterweight division, Brian Ebersol got a victory over Dennis Hallman. Even though it was a first-round TKO because of elbows, that's not what people were talking about at all, really. These two veterans with tons of fights between them getting in the cage. Afterwards, Dana White gave Ebersol an extra $70,000 bonus because of the nut-hugging little tights. And, of course, being in the arena, I didn't hear the commentary because I never get those little radios that WWE's ripped off now, by the way. But I didn't hear what anyone was saying. I caught up with hearing what Dana White said after the fact. But even in the building, I could see he was kind of making a show out of it, Hallman was. So, firstly, your thoughts on the fight, and then your thoughts on, let's call it, Nutsgate.
I mean, it was hard to concentrate on the actual fight because I'm just like, what the fuck am I looking at right now? And I'm just imagining if I'm watching this fight with someone who's never really seen mixed martial arts, so I'm trying to get into it, and I'm thinking, how the hell would I explain this right now? I was just glad to see Ebersol get his hand raised at the end, and he really took it to him.
Well, what about the whole suspension of the Speedos thing? They're banned now. Personally, I don't give a shit. I wasn't even really caring or paying attention. I didn't really even care, so I just don't see why everyone's making a big deal about it.
I don't know. I guess since we haven't really seen them since Dan Shamrock and Dave Severn and Don Fry and Mark the Hammer Coleman, like those days.
Well, we're talking right now, Rodney, as two guys who grew up practically staring at Hulk Hogan's nutsack in yellow tights, yellow underwear.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I guess that wrestling fans is just jaded to seeing guys in Speedos, trunks, whatever you want to call it, rolling around with each other. But I guess it's different for MMA fans, especially the MMA fans who don't know that the pioneers of the sport, even guys in Japan, that was their attire.
How about instead of banning them, we make it mandatory that the card girls go back to the thongs that they used to wear back then?
Yes, please. I would love that. I would attend every event.
Attend every event. I'd never watch a fight. Everything would end on a freeze frame of Ariane Celeste.
I would hope that every fight would go to decision just to see the rounds.
Well, let's go above the waist now and move on to the middleweight division because Vitor Belfort, coming back after that Steven Seagal knockout back in February to Anderson Silva against Sexyama. Maybe Sexyama should have worn the Speedo. Yoshihiro Akiyama, what is this, his third loss in a row now? First round knockout by Vitor Belfort. And the controversy afterwards was whether Belfort was punching him in the back of the head. And people were comparing it to when he came back the other year and fought Rich Franklin in his first fight back in UFC and seemingly won the same way. Now, Akiyama was medically suspended as per usual for a lot of people after UFC for a certain amount of days, just to get medically cleared and make sure everything's okay, but his was for head trauma. And Dana White said, this is kind of aside the point, that he wants him to cut back down to welterweight to stay in UFC pretty much. It's going to be a matter of his job if he doesn't. But let's get to the technique, though, because it seems to me that we're just talking about old school UFC, which we did on the last show, number 53, and I've been watching a lot of those back, and you can't believe some of the shit that they were getting away with back then. And I know what a blow to the back of the head looks like. So it seems to me that I don't think Belfort is necessarily targeting the back of the head. Maybe some of these guys falling away, it ends up accidentally grazing their head or whatever, but it hasn't been addressed by officials. He hasn't been suspended or disqualified or fined in any way. But watching it back, I could kind of see, if you wanted to make that argument, how it might be. So let's see what you thought about the fight, how the careers are going for these two fighters, and whether he's punching in the back of the head or not.
Well, this fight went exactly as I thought it was going to go. I knew Akiyama was going to try to stand with him. And Vitor, unless you're Anderson Silva, this is the wrong guy you want to stand with. This guy he's one of the best boxers, fastest hands in MMA. He's very strong, very experienced. I guess I never knew this, or I just never realized it, that all his wins in UFC are by knockout or TKO. Like, it's insane. So this went exactly as I expected. I thought Akiyama was going to put up a little more of a fight, but against Vitor Belfort, it's not going to happen. As far as the punches in the back of the head, Eric, Akiyama was already done. I mean, I definitely caught that the first time watching it, that they did graze the back of his head. I don't think they were intentional, and Akiyama was already out before any shots hit the back of his head. So I don't think it's an issue. I think he was down in that anyway. I really don't think that was intentional. I don't see why any action should be taken against Vitor. You put him in a rematch, it's going to end the same way. Speaking of rematches,
Vitor Belfort saying in the interview afterwards that he wants to get back in title contention. I think he's got a ways to go with how one-sided that one round was in February against Anderson Silva. But let's move on to the main event. In the light heavyweight division, pretty much for number one contendership, definitely for Rashad, possibly for Ortiz if he had made it, but he didn't. Rashad Evans defeats Tito Ortiz in the second round with a vicious TKO. Man, my sternum felt that knee against the cage when he nailed Ortiz with it. He was pretty much done after that. It was just a matter of a few more punches. But in the first round, it was a little back and forth. It seemed like Ortiz had a chance, but maybe he gassed out in the second round. Either way, Rashad Evans is now the number one contender, and whether he fights John Jones or Quentin Rampage Jackson, I think either fight is an intriguing matchup. So let's see what you think about Ortiz's failed second fight in a few weeks.
I'm going to disagree with a little bit of what you said in the beginning, where you talked about the lack of interest for the show, because I think that once Ortiz was announced as the replacement for Phil Davis, it really brought a lot more hype and more interest into this card, just because of Tito's surprise win over Bader.
Oh, I understand that. And us talking as fans, we can make that point. But so far, the numbers and the attendance didn't reflect that, and we don't know the buy rate yet.
Well, regardless, a number or buy rate isn't going to keep me from watching the next event or keeping interest in MMA.
I'm just making a point. You know, Rodney, we've been talking about this stuff for a long time. I've been working in pro wrestling a long time. There is a business side to it. I mean, it is a sport, yeah, but it's also a business. So a lot of this shit comes into the conversation. It's just a different angle.
It is business. Tito put his business in the Philly. And let me ask you, Eric, because I've heard that Tito had a huge reaction coming into the arena. Was it like that? You were there.
Here's what's funny about that. And this is the same story throughout the night when they would show them walking in or the fight graphic. Same story with the entrances. A pretty mixed reaction for Tito Ortiz. A lot of cheers. I was one of them. But a lot of audible boos, so I was kind of surprised by that because it's a good story. Like, old school Tito Ortiz, the guy who was the dominant new light heavyweight champion when UFC was really starting to become big. He was the torch carrier from the old Ken Shamrock era on, really. And I know he's the Huntington Beach bad boy. He's fucking a porn star and all that other shit. So there's a lot of stuff, like his attitude maybe, that people don't like him for, and he's had a lot of issues with injuries lately. But I don't see how, when he got that amazing guillotine submission victory over Ryan Bader just last month or so, that people couldn't get into him again, because this was just an awesome comeback story. And with Vitor Belfort getting the win, I was hoping that Ortiz would get it too, to make it a real old-school UFC comeback. I mean, the prelims went well because Mike Brown had losses already this year in UFC, and he secured his job. So I was happy to see him get the decision over Namfan. But at the same time, Ortiz had the same story. He secured his job recently, and now it looked like he might get back on track. It was a great comeback story, so I was surprised with the mixed reaction. But then Rashad Evans came out, and wow, almost all boos. In wrestling, we'd say a lot of heel heat on Rashad Evans. I don't know really why. Maybe it's the lay and pray that he's been doing to win his boring fights, like with Rampage recently. And I like Rashad Evans a lot. I think he's a very talented fighter. We've seen it in his fights against Chuck Liddell and others. So he definitely has talent as far as wrestling and stand-up. But maybe with the disappointment with the Rampage fight last year after it got so much hype, and maybe some of the stuff that's unfolded with Greg Jackson and John Jones since then. I don't know why. I don't really know why everyone's turned on Rashad Evans, but they seemingly have. So there's your answer.
I don't know, something with Rashad. I mean, yeah, the Rampage fight, because of the hype, was a little bit of a disappointment. Both fighters were, actually no, not so much Rashad, but Rampage was coming off a long layoff, and Rashad was using mostly wrestling to win the match. And if that match went 5 rounds, Rampage would have won, but that's another story. The thing with Tito came, he was game, he still looks good, he was pretty close to securing the guillotine. He had Rashad in trouble early on, but I just think that we just saw a whole new Rashad Evans. I still think Tito could be competitive with a lot of light heavyweights, but I just think that Rashad, with all the, he's been out for 14 months or whatever, but he has been training hard. He looks great. He's one of the very few people in the light heavyweight division that could beat John Jones.
Well, let's see if it is John Jones, because John Jones has to get past Rampage Jackson. And as we progress forward, we're going to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, because this past Sunday at the Bradley Center, yet another venue, another state that UFC has made their debut in just this year, with UFC On Versus 5. And hell of a card yet again. And I guess because of the lack of star power, let's say, at the top, not one of the bigger names that people know, people often dismiss these Versus cards. I think their biggest drawing one was the John Jones-Vladimir Matyushenko one last year, which was great, but it's been kind of on the downturn since then. But if you're an MMA fan, I think you'll love this show, Rodney. And I think the story outside of Chris Lytle was the WEC guys. I was real happy with how the WEC guys, because that was mentioned on the commentary, how a lot of the WEC fighters were perceived as less than the UFC fighters because UFC is number one and you got to fight the best guys. Well, I guess they finally stepped up. Donald Cerrone in the lightweight division defeats Charles Oliveira. Now, Oliveira got a lot of hype, and Cerrone's coming off a couple victories already in the UFC, but he beat Oliveira with a first-round TKO due to punches. I guess he's one of the more character-like MMA fighters with his cowboy hat and everything, but Donald Cerrone doing well again. Your thoughts on Cerrone's victory?
Cerrone was one of those guys who, once he came in the UFC, he's been in a tear. 3-0 already in the UFC, and it's only August. He could finish 4-0 if he gets another fight and wins later this year. And, Charles Oliveira, this is his 3rd loss in a row. Well, actually, the 2nd loss in a row if we count that no contest or whatever. But he had, like you said, this kid had a lot of hype. He's only, 21 years old. He came to the UFC, 12-0, something like that. And
very young still, so even though he's lost, still got a lot of potential and a lot of time to improve.
Yeah, and, his one loss was against dominant lightweight Jim Miller, and he has very, very dangerous submissions. But Donald Cerrone just really neutralized them and showed his weaknesses and really pounded the shit out of him, basically. And Cerrone looks good, and it's really going to be exciting to see who he goes against next, because now we kind of have the same situation you had at light heavyweight, because it looks like Greg Jackson's camp is running the lightweight division between Cerrone, you got Clay Guida. I don't know why I can't think of his name.
Happens to the best of us.
Melvin
Gillard.
Yeah, top guys there, and they all pretty much said that, like, for title contention or title fight, that they would be willing to fight each other. We'll see what happens from there, but lightweight division is really on a tear right now.
To say the fucking least, and we're going to talk some more about the lightweight division in a second, but right now in our chat room, DF with the Cisco, that's a great name, asks, what about what Dana White says about Alistair Overeem? Now, he addressed that on Sunday on Versus. He said that he would be all too willing to sign Alistair Overeem to the UFC if Golden Glory is willing to change up their structure. The story there is that Golden Glory is a camp, I believe in Europe, that the way they had to deal with Strikeforce is that Strikeforce would pay the camp first, and then the camp would distribute the money to the fighters, whereas Zuffa, now the deal was in place with Strikeforce before Zuffa bought them, Zuffa pays the fighters directly, and then they pay management. They didn't want to do it, so instead of changing, Zuffa said, okay, we're going to fire all your people, which was Marlos Conan, Alistair Overeem, and a few other people. Sergei Haritonov is yet to be dealt with, but I'm sure that'll happen after the tournament. But anyway, Dana White said, yeah, I'll sign Alistair Overeem to UFC if he's willing to change the deal. And if he does, great. I say put him right in there immediately with a champion, and whoever it is after Velasquez dos Santos. Let's see if this guy really is the best heavyweight striker in MMA, dream champion, K1 tournament winner. Let's unify the fucking Strikeforce and UFC heavyweight titles already. But anyway, as we were talking about, Rodney, the lightweight division, which is funny because in the hype, Mike Goldberg actually said light heavyweight Jim Miller. I was like, what? I had to rewind the DVR, and I was like, I know I didn't just hear that. But anyway, Ben Henderson giving Jim Miller his first loss in, I believe, after 7 victories in a row. Jim Miller out of New Jersey. Even in losing, though, I think looked pretty good. But I want to look at the scores a little closer because as happy as I was that Ben Henderson won in such a great fashion, I didn't agree with the scoring per se. Now, Ben Henderson won with the score. Let's do it like Bruce Buffer style. The judges score this card 30-27, 29-28, 30-26 for the winner by unanimous decision. Now, 30-27 is what I had, Rod, and I think that's fair. 29-28, that's giving Jim Miller a round. If that's going to happen, the only one that it could have possibly been was the first round, maybe, which I didn't put in his favor, but okay, maybe. But then 30-26, that's what I disagree with, because that means that there was a round where Jim Miller got so trounced, so utterly beaten that it was completely one-sided, and I don't really see that, because even in Ben Henderson's victory, Jim Miller looked totally, completely dangerous on the ground. How many submission attempts did we see that looked pretty dire? Ben Henderson really was smooth this time, as his nickname said, and was able to wait it out and counter and get out of him. But Jim Miller looked like he could have stolen the victory at any moment, so I don't see how anybody could score at 30-26. But that being said, Ben Henderson looked a lot better in his second UFC fight than he did in his first in Toronto. This is the sort of fighter that we wanted to see out of the WEC guys. And with Jim Miller pretty much guaranteed to be getting, I guess, the winner of Frankie Edgar and Gray Maynard with a victory here after 8 wins in a row, Ben Henderson snuck up and, as the announcer said, made the lightweight division much more interesting. Before the night even ended, the announcers were already hyping up the immediate thought that I had that Ben Henderson should be fighting Clay Guida next, because Guida beat the last WEC lightweight champion, Anthony Pettis. I think Guida and Henderson is going to be, if they do it, and it seems like they're going in that direction, an amazing fight, and I think whoever wins probably should be number one contender in this very stacked division. But I've talked enough about this awesome fight, so let's see what you thought about Ben Henderson. All right, smooth, defeating Jim Miller.
I like this fight for a bunch of different reasons. I always like the underdog coming out on top, and for someone who is a WEC guy, and Jim Miller said in a lot of his pre-fight interviews how WEC guys, it's not the same. It's not like the guys from AAA could go right into Major League Baseball, and he's just making WEC look like almost a training ground for UFC, and that UFC is the big stage, and it's not the same. These guys can't compare. I like Jim Miller as a fighter. At the same time, I want to see these WEC lightweights come in and shake up the UFC lightweight division, make things more interesting, and prove that they are two elite fighters. And this was probably one of the best performances I've ever seen from a lightweight. Ben Henderson just dominated, like on the feet, on the ground, which was really, really surprising. I really thought that was going to go the opposite direction, but Ben Henderson just showed that this guy basically cannot be submitted, because there were times where he had heel hooks where I really thought that Ben Henderson was really in trouble, but Jim Miller just couldn't secure him right.
What about that standing head and arm triangle with the body scissors?
Yeah, that was a little goofy. I think that was a mistake. I really don't think he really could go anywhere with that unless he had him on the ground. As far as the scoring goes, 30-26, I really thought was a little bit harsh. I think even towards the very last seconds of the fight, Jim Miller was pushing forward, throwing punches, throwing with authority. He wasn't tired. He was a submission or a punch away from ending the fight. 29-28, I don't see it. I don't see how you could give Jim Miller one round. I don't know what fight they were fighting.
I don't either, but the first round was the closest. That's the only one it could have possibly have been.
The first round was, I guess, the less dominant round of all three for Ben Henderson.
Now, I still scored it for Henderson on my own card at home, just so you know.
Oh, yeah. Hey, put him against Clay Guida. I think he does the same. I think he finishes Clay Guida.
Really?
I think he finishes Clay Guida within 3 rounds.
All right. That's interesting.
Clay Guida, hey, he's been enrolled since he's been at Jackson's camp. Submitting Gomi, I think, was his most impressive win. You give him and Pettis 2 more rounds, Pettis would have finished him. Henderson finishes him.
Well, when you talked about this guy could not be submitted, I thought you could have said the same thing about Dan Hardy until the main event. And what a story it was. I think they called it the storybook ending, because the day before, Chris Lytle, UFC welterweight, announced that he was going to be retiring with the fight. Now, UFC also announced that the winner was going to get a Harley-Davidson too, but we'll also see what else he got on his way out. So Chris Lytle beat Dan Hardy pretty much at the last minute in the 3rd round of what was really practically a boxing fight, up until that moment when Dan Hardy tried stealing the 3rd round by going for a takedown, and he ended up in a deep, deep guillotine. And Chris Lytle did what GSP was not able to do last year, Rodney, and that was submit Dan Hardy. Dan Hardy, I was really hoping would lose this fight. I'm just not a fan of his, but man, this guy is
you don't like anyone named Hardy, do you?
No, I don't. But Dan Hardy is one tough bloke. My God, this guy against GSP was getting his arm bent in half and didn't submit. But then he got caught in this really deep guillotine, and then he tapped to Chris Lytle. Wow, what a finish. And they really piled on the prizes afterwards, giving Chris Lytle, I guess, not just the Harley-Davidson, but the submission of the night and fight of the night honors. I would have given fight of the night to Henderson and Jim Miller myself. But what a great finish for Chris Lytle and Dan Hardy. And, of course, the icing on the cake of Lytle bringing in his young blonde daughter into the cage. But anyway, what'd you think of Dan Hardy being submitted by Chris Lytle and Lytle retiring?
I thought it was a great ending. It was a really back and forth fight. Lytle had the edge, but I think it was pretty even. I thought Dan Hardy was giving a good fight, and this is the fight that people wanted. This is why Chris Lytle wanted to fight Dan Hardy. Dan Hardy comes to fight. Dan Hardy wanted Chris Lytle because he wants to fight that he knows is not only going to entertain fans, but it's also going to fit into his style. The one problem I kind of questioned when it happened.
The dye job in his mohawk.
Yeah, no.
I question that.
All right. This is Chris Lytle has been a company man, has been in the company for years. This is his last fight, always been respectful, not coming off any losing streak, okay? Why is he the one waiting for Dan Hardy to come out? Dan Hardy not only has lost his last 3 fights, Eric, he hasn't won a round since 2009. And meanwhile, he gets the champion treatment. He gets to come out last. What is that? I mean, yeah, it says Hardy versus Lytle. Yes, he has a bigger name. Yes, he's more charismatic. But still, for Chris Lytle's last fight, I mean, hey, it could be the Rocky story too. Rocky wouldn't come out last for his final fight. But at the same time, you should give Chris Lytle the champion treatment for his last fight. But
that's right. Mason the Line Dixon came out last in Rocky Balboa.
Exactly. But Mason the Line Dixon was coming off a 3-fight losing streak. But anyway, regardless, a great film. Even Hardy's first attempt at a shot, I thought it was stupid because he doesn't shoot. He was smart enough not to shoot against GSP. Why shoot against a guy who's not so much known for his wrestling, but known for his very unorthodox jiu-jitsu and submissions, and you saw that. It was a great ending to a great fight, a great night, and almost a perfect ending for Chris Lytle. And people complained that Dan Hardy should be cut, but he gave a good fight. He gave it his all. I can see why they would keep him. I'm not the one to, I'm not the one to someone that has a string of losses that you should cut them off. I mean, give people a chance. It's how they live their lives. I'm not the one to tell people that they should find something else to do.
Well, I mean, they had the same logic with Joe Daddy Stevenson, and it just got to the point where too many losses, sorry, you got to go. No matter how hard and well you fight, you got to win, I guess. And we'll tie that into what we're going to talk about in a little bit, actually. Anyway, that was UFC On Versus 5, and last fight for Chris Lytle, but it will be coming up, the last UFC On Versus. That's coming up on October 1st in Washington, D.C. Got my tickets already, Rodney. Bantamweight title fight between...
Wow.
Yep, this is my 5th UFC this year. So Dominic Cruz defending the Bantamweight title against Demetrius Johnson in what we now know will be the last UFC On Versus, because UFC will be on Fox. The story broke today about UFC finally making the deal that they've been looking for. They signed a deal with Fox to air on the Fox network. It seems like most of the shows are going to end up on FX, like the Ultimate Fighter, Unleashed, etc. They might be doing some on Fuel TV as well. But it also seems like these live cards, like we've been seeing on Versus, are going to end up on Fox. Here in the New Jersey, New York area, it's Fox 5 for us. But it seems like those are going to air on network TV. So I'm pretty sure that UFC knows what they're doing. It's going to end up, I think, better for MMA on broadcast TV than Elite XC did on CBS a few years ago. But this is a huge story, and people are talking about it all over our message board, Facebook. So let's hear what you got to say about it, Rodney. UFC on Fox.
This is it. I mean, this is what UFC's been looking for. We talked a few shows ago about Macho Man and how he was part of that huge Saturday Night Live on NBC where they had like 33 million viewers. I think now that like UFC and pay-per-view is a big stage, Fight TV being a part of Viacom gave them a lot of exposure too. But now you go to Fox. They're on one of the main channels. I think it's going to be huge for them. I mean, absolutely huge. I would not be surprised if for one of their first shows, they put one of their big names on it. They put an Anderson Silva. They put a GSP.
That's exactly what I was going to go and ask you next, because obviously they make a ton of money on pay-per-view. They're the kings of pay-per-view right now, and that's where they make a lot of their money. This is a $90 million deal, however, and you know first impressions are everything. Yes, they've been giving us some good shows, but a lot of these Versus cards are more for the diehard fans, I guess, like us, who appreciate all of it. But for name value, you got to look at the guys like Brock Lesnar, GSP, those sort of names, and that's actually what I was going to ask you next. If you think that they're going to bring out the big guns for at least their first show, if not all 4 shows in a year when they broadcast on Fox.
Well, I think so, too. I wouldn't be surprised if Brock Lesnar's first fight in 2012 would be on Fox. I think they'll put a lot of the lightweight guys on there, some of their more exciting fighters on there, guys who have charisma. this is a great chance to really educate the fans on what mixed martial arts is. Instead of having Kimbo Slice main event, I just can't wait to see how Zuffa and UFC is going to be presented on a huge network like Fox. I know that one of their big things is like they like to do their own production. I don't see them giving that up. But now that they're on the same channel as like American Idol and
I'm
football,
pretty sure, not to cut you off, but I'm pretty sure that's part of the deal, that because that's why they didn't sign with HBO. HBO wanted to take over the production, and they're like, we're doing it our way.
Exactly. I really think that this is great for them. I'm very happy for UFC. We talk about people getting more exposure to UFC and more exposure to MMA, and how in order for this thing to grow, people are just really going to have to learn more about the sport, because it's not your typical stick and ball sports that people grew up with and they know. To understand it, you really have to know some of the intricacies of some of the moves and just see some exciting fights, and not people have that chance. And I think that UFC is going to bring it, because when they have this sight set of something, they really come through.
One last item before we move on to pro wrestling. A lot of people have been asking what this means for Spike TV, because obviously TNA has been, I think, their number one program for a while now. And between UFC programming, it seems like they're made up primarily of Star Wars reruns. But it's also been coming up in the rumor mill that Bellator FC could be moved from another Viacom channel, MTV2 or Trace, whichever they air on, and filling that MMA void on Spike TV. What do you think about that? Because Spike TV has pretty much been the MMA channel for a while now. It's kind of like when WCW stopped airing on TNT. I haven't watched TNT since. So maybe I won't watch Spike TV unless they got MMA anymore. So do you think that's in their minds? Like, are they going to want to get Bellator in there to fill that void and keep those fans possibly? And if so, do you think that being moved to the bigger network Spike will afford them maybe some more funding? Would they be able to get maybe some of these UFC cast-offs, like maybe some of the... And they've got a good roster themselves. I like Ben Askren and Cole Conrad and a lot of the guys over there at Bellator, but it is a very different format. What they do is they have tournaments, and they're different divisions, and the winners at tournaments get title shots. Any other time the champion fights, like Eddie Alvarez, it's not a title fight if it's not against a tournament winner. I don't know how people are going to take to that, so it's a very different structure, and we've talked about it on the show, how I think they should change, and they being Zuffa, Strikeforce over to a tournament format to counter this possible Bellator move. So do you think that this is actually, in a ripple effect way, good for Bellator? Should this actually go down? Could they get more of the names like Joe Stevenson, Fedor maybe?
Yes, I think it would be beneficial for them to go on Spike, because Spike has more experience broadcasting MMA and knowing what to do with it, and they've worked with Zuffa since 2005. It'll only be beneficial. However, I mean, I just think, same thing with TNA, that their overall presentation needs improvement. I think we just need more of the feel of you're watching something special, like you're watching a big fight. Hopefully, Spike really just looks at it and does some tweaks to really make it special and catch people's attention, because now it's like it's almost as if you got a new girl that you want to show around to your ex-girlfriend, and oh look, I got this new hot girl now, I'm going to show you. Now they're competing basically against one of their former partners, and now that UFC is going to be on Fox, it's going to be really tough to do, because UFC now is constantly going to bring their A game because they have to. Bellator, if they can bring in some of the big names, that will only help. And hopefully, like, their best hope, wish, or whatever, is to pray that Zuffa lets go of the women's division and people like Gina Carano and Miesha Tate.
Carano isn't even a factor now. I think you mean more like Cyborg and Miesha Tate types.
I still think Carano's a draw. You put Gina Carano in Bellator.
I'm not saying she's not a draw. She's just not active.
It doesn't matter. I mean, she's still scheduled to fight. She's still training. I still think fighting is in her interest. But if I'm a Bellator, what they need is a name like Gina Carano, just to get people's attention. Because UFC, what they had was the first Ultimate Fighter finale that had Ken Shamrock on the show. And a lot of people knew Ken Shamrock not only from, like, UFC days, from his WWF days. they need a name like that to get eyes on their product. Having Cole Conrad main event a show is great. Of an athlete he is, and great of a champion I'm sure he is, it's not going to catch the average viewer's attention.
Well, comparing it to having a new girl you want to show off to your ex, I just watched Eddie Griffin's latest stand-up this weekend, and he had a great line about, you get a new girl, you don't fuck down like Tiger Woods did, you fuck up. Upgrade. So let's see what happens with MMA going forward. It's going to be very interesting, especially with UFC Rio coming up immediately, the rematch with Maynard and Edgar, and then we go into 2012 after Dos Santos and Velasquez, and we get UFC on Fox. And let's see if maybe Bellator can step up on Spike TV. And we're going to step up now into pro wrestling, but before we do, it is time for the news. JT Lightning, CAPW promoter / Cleveland indie wrestler, died on Thursday, August 4th, after a bout with cancer. The Roundtable sends its condolences to his friends and family. WSU on Saturday, August 6th from Union City, New Jersey's Ace Arena saw the champion Mercedes Martinez, who the promotion claims is the longest reigning champion in the country, as champion of 3 years. She defeated the tag champion, Lexus, in 73 minutes, making it the longest women's match in wrestling history. I'd like to have 73 minutes of sweaty body contact with either one of them. WWE released Melina Perez, D.H. Smith, Vladimir Kozlov, and Chris Masters on Friday, August 5th, with Gail Kim tweeting that she quit the promotion on Monday, August 1st, though WWE is currently benching her, it seems. Melina accompanied her boyfriend John Morrison on the road the following tour and was not allowed in the building, apparently not realizing being fired means they don't want you around anymore. Following the release of Strikeforce heavyweight champion Alistair Overeem, Zuffa released Strikeforce women's bantamweight Marlos Conan, Strikeforce heavyweight Valentine Overeem, and UFC heavyweight John Olav Inemo, all from the Golden Glory team due to refusing to reshape the pay structure of their fighters' deals. I guess they told Golden Glory to hit the Golden Showers, though Dana White is open to signing Alistair Overeem to UFC exclusively. And lastly, Stacy Keibler is heavily rumored to be dating George Clooney, as she was spotted outside his Studio City, California home recently. Needless to say, George Clooney is a huge step up from David Flair, but then so is George Lopez. Flair is boss. Poof. And those are just some of the news stories that are on WrestlingRoundtable.com right now. You can go there and find out more. We also have polls going on. Right now, the poll is, should John Cena turn heel or not? John Cena just tweeted the other night, oh, this archaic term of heel and face, I'm me. Pfft, bullshit. He knows it's bullshit, because it's the same line of shades of gray and we're not going to insult your intelligence BS McMahon once said on TV in the Attitude Era in November or so, 97, when he started that crap. No more good guys versus bad guys, like it's antiquated. If that's the case, then no one would turn heel and face anymore, and people still talk about that all the time. Yeah, it's antiquated, because pro wrestling is based on antiquated stuff. It is the most basic idea ever. Good guy versus bad guy, good versus evil. So let's see if you think John Cena has had his run as top babyface or whatever long enough. Should he turn heel? Go vote now. That is still up. And how interested are you in WWE's programming going forward into the fall? Those are the polls going on right now at WrestlingRoundtable.com. 803 area code, you're on.
My name is David Brown, Newberry County, South Carolina. I just wanted to call and say I'm a huge fan of you guys, Eric, and try to promote my wrestling fanfic on fanfiction.net, Path of the Archangel. I think it's a good fit. Corey's read it, the also super hot Corey.
Oh, why, thank you. And yes, I have read it, and it's very well written. The commentary is even a huge part of this story, and I do encourage you guys to read this.
Well, thanks a lot, Corey. That is on our Facebook, and that is not the only account we have. You can get all the links to all our social networking sites at WrestlingRoundtable.com. And let me tell you about WrestlingRoundtable.com for a second here, because it is your hub for everything Wrestling Roundtable. Please join us there at WrestlingRoundtable.com to keep up to date. We have Twitter, Facebook, 2 pages on Facebook, a fan page and a group page. Of course, the links to YouTube, Go Fight Live, and our message board, where lots of people are talking about the show and everything going on in mixed martial arts and pro wrestling always. And, of course, right here on blogtalkradio.com. Now, if you tuned in a little early, you got to hear the podcast of our last show, which was show number 53, which covered the SEG years of UFC and Randy Couture's career, an all MMA-themed show, which was the first time we've done that on camera. And it seems like people enjoyed it. A lot of people leaving comments that they got turned on to MMA because of the show and reliving some of the old school UFC memories, so thanks for that. But you can find the audio podcasts of every show we've ever done on iTunes and blogtalkradio.com. You can go through our archives. You can find the links in the video/audio section at WrestlingRoundtable.com. But if you go to iTunes or WrestlingRoundtablePodcast.com, in iTunes, just type in Wrestling Roundtable on the search engine box, and you'll find everything. Now, we did have shows in the first season, which was a couple of years ago already, unbelievably. But every show we've ever done is there. And if you are like, well, you guys should talk about the best and worst finishers or tag teams or factions or whatever, well, we have. It's just a lot of those are not available on YouTube anymore, but they are available to listen to in the audio form. And while you're at WrestlingRoundtable.com, please go to the Wrestling Roundtable store and support us by shopping for the Wrestling Roundtable t-shirt. We've got Pro Wrestling Respect DVDs. Corey, you just mentioned being in Chicago. There were Wrestling Roundtable shirts running around the building in Chicago Ridge at the Frontier Fieldhouse. So wear them to your local Raw happening or indie show or whatever and get some people involved in the conversation. Pull up a steel chair and join the conversation. And, of course, we also have an Amazon store. So if you want to find anything on Amazon.com, someone just bought the Money in the Bank DVD today. It doesn't have to be just wrestling or MMA, though. It can be anything that's available on Amazon.com. You can do that through our store. Justin in Eagle, Wisconsin, hello.
First off, I'd like to reply to Corey's shout-out. It was nice seeing you, too, Corey.
Hello again.
Yeah, hello. I'd also like to say my comments on the ROH tapings. It was a pretty interesting setup that they needed to work on. They just had a lot of time between matches, which I assume is probably to fit in commercial breaks. And I'm not sure how long each of the tapings is going to be. They basically did two matches per taping.
Well, there were a lot of technical problems, specifically audio issues that needed to be sorted out. So I think that's why there was a delay in the taping and why it went so late.
That sounds about right. I also posted a kind of a guessing game on the message board to see if anyone could guess who's now doing commentary for Ring of Honor. Please don't Google search it. That takes the fun out of it.
Well, we know who it is. It's Nigel McGuinness. It certainly wasn't me, and I was pretty surprised and happy to read about that because there's rumors all over the internet about why Nigel's not wrestling or wasn't cleared and whatever, but whatever the problems may be, at least he's able to have this spot to come back to Ring of Honor in a role that people are intrigued with, and it's nice to see Nigel active in that realm doing that again. I'm a fan of Nigel McGuinness, so it's good to see him. But let's also introduce Will Vafides, the other half of the Battle of the Wills. Hello, Will Vafides.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, to Wrestling Roundtable Radio. I'm glad to be back. And the TLD website has just been updated. Go to TLDWrestling.com. And remember, March 18th is the day that I return live in the ring. Battle of the Wills is going tremendous, and I thank all the fans for commenting and enjoying the show. And I know Will Brooks is crying because he's ready to lose the Battle of the Wills.
Well, if you're going to plug where you're wrestling, you might as well let us know who it's for and where and, so we can actually find out.
Oh, I don't give details that soon. It's all about suspense, ladies and gentlemen. You all want to know, you all got to wait. It's going to be a Christmas surprise.
If you say so. 416, that's a Toronto number, I believe.
Hey, Eric, it's Graham, actually.
I kind of thought it might be you, Graham, and with a international call coming through, I wanted to put you on right there. So what's going on, Graham?
Oh, very appreciated. Just thought since everyone seemed to find by completely freaking out over CM Punk on Sunday and Kevin fucking Nash being in the middle of all this shit, I just thought I'd call in and just say, maybe I overreacted, but I just hate that. If that same thing had happened in TNA, every person on that board would be going nuts about how this is just another example of them pushing ancient, over-the-hill stars over the guys who should be the future.
You mean if it was Nash, let's say, clotheslining AJ Styles, then people would say it was the same old bullshit.
Or let's just use the example of how Nash left. Nash, Jarrett, and Sting, I think it was, and he lays out Samoa Joe. And everyone was furious. And somehow I'm the only one pissed off that he does it to CM Punk.
I thought it was wonderful.
It just bothers me that the first hot angle, like, this is the most I've cared about this company in over a decade. And they put Kevin Nash in the middle of it? Really?
Really?
Well, you know how people were tuning back into Monday Night Raw or WWE in general for seemingly the first time in a long time? All these jaded fans who said, this company's so far gone, I don't want to watch it, but CM Punk brought me back? Well, this answers the age-old question. What could make this even better? The answer's Kevin Nash. Ramon in Chicago, you're on the air.
Hello, Eric. A lot of people seem to think that I'm not giving the CM Punk angle its due because I'm one of those who is also ultra-critical of it. I will say this. They've done very good at making him over right now, but I just have this sneaking suspicion that in 1 year's time, nobody's going to care what CM Punk is doing.
Well, there is a thread on the message board right now about how long can this, quote, reality, which is really just another word for work shoot, stuff go on? How much shelf life does it actually have?
I thought it was pretty good at first with the first promo he did, then going back with the Vince McMahon when he tried to sign him on. And I thought that the promo he did with Cena, like right before SummerSlam, was pretty good as well. But it just feels like they're not really taking it to the next level. They're just at the first stage of this. I mean, how long? That's a very legitimate question. How long can this shoot work stuff last? Eventually, it's going to get really old. Who cares about the Clique? They haven't been relevant in over 13 years. Why is he shooting on them?
As was said before about if this had happened in TNA, this stuff with Kevin Nash, people would be shitting all over it. And with this in mind, I'm going to bring on Royce from California because I know that you've got a lot to say and you've got a different view, but I'm pretty sure this is going to be in line with what you're going to say. Because you've said on the show before, if Russo had done it, people would be shitting on it. And really, that's how I feel about this fourth wall bullshit. Because when you use kayfabe-breaking carny terms like heel and work rate, which have no real context in the world of wrestling. Like I was watching a video today on the making of WWE 12 that's coming out, and they actually called it selling animations. No, they're not, because in the video game, that's not a performance. That's not a work. That's supposed to be real. And when the camera's on, when the show's going on, this is supposed to be real. So no one's a heel. There isn't work rate. All that sort of inside bullshit. People are debating, well, the Russo's work shoot stuff is over the top and way too inside and way too much. So they're debating the nuance of worked shoots and whether it's too much, too little. Maybe there is a difference, but to me that's like choosing between the lesser of two evils. Maybe there is a lesser of two evil, but it's still doing evil. So as soon as you use the inside terms, I'm sorry, I can't go along with that. Don't like it. So with that in mind, Royce in California, the floor is yours.
Well, Eric, now I know how all the smart marks felt last month when Punk and Danielson and Christian went over on Sunday. Because I was so happy when I saw all those vanilla midgets just go down one by one, and then dead tattooed rat dirtbag, indie-rific, as Nash called him, ate a jackknife, and that title just floated right off his waist into a, well, I would say more deserving, but someone I'd rather see on the top, Del Rio. But I'll also have to say that yesterday's promo with Nash was not that great. Man, he didn't say any of the cool stuff I was hoping he'll say, like how he'll beat up Punk and have sex with his girlfriend and stuff like that. I want to see that, Nash. Not the business and NWO. And NWO, we're not going to bring up Hogan. That was pretty funny. The thing that I want to see since January finally happened. Just Nash coming in, just a Clique guy just coming in and just burying an indie guy. If it was Danielson, I'd probably have the same thing, just all smiles. Or even Christian, like any guy that smart marks, work rate, and all that kind of stuff, and it's Nash just waltzes in, jackknifes him, and then just puts it back in mid-card purgatory. That's when I want to see since Royal Rumble, and I finally got it. So now I know how people felt when Punk won the belt.
Let's go to Anthony in the Bronx.
What's going on, man? Well, last night's promo was highlight of last night. But I really think Kevin Nash should have brought his A game because he did look kind of rusty on the mic. And I know he could do better than that. But I really didn't get why the security had to get between them when Punk was going to the ring. Like, when
I'm pretty sure that's got something to do with the angle with the whole Triple H Steph Nash intrigue.
You really think they're going to have another reunion of the Click?
In some form, I'm sure it's going down that route.
Yeah.
Or maybe they'll just do a swerve and he was helping Alberto Del Rio, something like that. But we'll get into Raw a little later on. Let's move on to TNA HardCORE Justice, emanating once again, as they usually do, from the Impact Zone in Orlando. Corey, the opener, which I'm sure you were really looking forward to, was the champion of the X Division, Brian Kendrick, or Spanky, against Austin Aries and Alex Shelley in a Ring of Honor three-way, essentially. But he retained his title over the other two former Gen Next members. So how'd you think that opener went?
This was the best match on the card. It was all downhill after this one. Matter of fact, I want to bring up my own poll that I posted on the boards. Apparently 67% of our listeners believe that I should bash TNA more frequently. So this is the last nice thing I have to say about them. This was a great match, and I'm surprised that it opened the card. I thought this was going to be closer to the main event, but shows what I know about TNA.
Way to keep it positive. Let's move on to the Knockouts Tag Title match between Miss Tessmacher, who is not from Superman, and Tara, who is looking incredibly fucking milfy lately. Just so good. Anyway, they defeated Rosita y Sarita from Mexican America. How do you think this women's tag title match went, Will Vafides?
It was okay. I'm going to be straight up. I actually left and got something to eat during that match. I just did not care about it. I'll be straight up. I don't really care about the women's tag team titles. They just don't mean anything, especially when they're not defended that often. I watched the first match. I loved that, but that match I kind of went away for. I was like, I could skip that one.
Tara is really pretty. That's the only nice thing I have to say about this match. This match is awful. God, who lets these clowns into the ring?
Okay. Let's move on then. In the Bound for Glory series, the Pope got a victory over Devon. Your thoughts on the Bound for Glory victory, Bound for Glory series victory for D'Angelo Dinero, Will Vafides?
It's about time he finally gets a win. He's been sitting at 0 for a while, and I do like the storyline they're doing with Devon. I like how his singles push is going with his kids. It's good. It's a little confusing at times because sometimes I don't know who's the heel and who's the face here in this match, but I think it was a fair match, nothing special. It progresses the storyline. So it was good. All
right, women's action again. The Knockouts champion, Mickie James, who I think they've been keeping her matches short for a while because, like John Cena's rumored to have been, she's been wrestling through injuries lately, a shoulder injury, I believe. But they took the belt off her finally, and I'd love to take her belt off, but it's for her pants. Anyway, Mickie James lost the title to Winter, the British women's wrestler, formerly of OVW and WWE. So how do you think that match went, Corey?
In one respect, I'm very glad that Winter won because I think it's her time to shine. I'm a little concerned about Mickie James, though. Although she's still extremely beautiful, she's starting to forget how to wrestle. I noticed that there were a lot of botches in this match. So one more reason why I'm glad Winter won.
Crimson in the Bound for Glory series, who, when he's not getting in a Twitter war with Goldberg, got a victory over Rob Van Dam by disqualification. So I guess he gets the points here. What do you think about Crimson's win over RVD, Will Vafides?
That was actually a pretty good match. I actually really did like that match. The ending was they're obviously setting up Jerry Lynn versus RVD for Bound for Glory. That's the reason why. I mean, the promo before they went out there was a little weird, how Jerry Lynn just popped up out of nowhere. That was really strange. And that when does RVD ever need anybody in his corner to help him out? So it didn't make any sense to begin with to start off with. And you knew Crimson was not going to lose this match because he can't lose. There's no way. They did the best possible scenario they could to not kill RVD by doing a DQ finish. And it's just a little confusing as far as why would Rob Van Dam need anybody in his corner, especially Jerry Lynn? I didn't get that. So it kind of ruined the match a little bit for me because you knew you were waiting for Jerry Lynn to do something, and that's what we got. And it was like, well, predictable. He was out there.
All right, well, we're about halfway so far, and Bill Treadway wanted to make it a point that he's the only person that thought this was a good show, and I don't think he's alone there. I've read some good reviews, but it doesn't seem like it's echoing here. But let's move on, Corey. Now it was a six-man tag of Immortal versus Fortune. I love how they put out an Immortal DVD, and yet, even watching the preview, I still can't follow what the fuck this actual storyline ever really was and who's in it. It's just like every heel, almost like the Alliance, is just in it with no real purpose and shit. So anyway, the Fortune team of Kazarian, Chris Daniels, and AJ Styles got a victory over Abyss, Gunner, and Scott Steiner. How do you think the six-man tag went, Corey?
It was okay. This would have been better if it was on Impact, and I can't follow the storyline either, and I actually watch Impact on a weekly basis. I don't know what the hell is going on. But I'm glad that AJ and Christopher and Kazarian won, but this was a match that should have been on the free show, not the pay-per-view.
Why? Why this one and not Pope and Devon?
Either one could have been moved to Impact. With Pope, they keep picking up his storyline and then dropping it for a few weeks, and then they pick it back up again, and they drop it. And with this match, it didn't feel like a pay-per-view quality match. This was an Impact match. At least the right people won. That's the only thing I can say, really.
Speaking of Impact quality, Bully Ray got a victory over Mr. Anderson. Seems to me, Will, that Mr. Anderson is like the Miz of TNA in the sense that it seemed like they were planning on doing something real big with this guy. They put the belt on him a few months ago, and now he's right back down into the mid-card and not really doing too much, and the main event has shifted elsewhere. In WWE's case, with the Miz, of course, Punk/Cena/Triple H, and now in TNA, Anderson's out of the title picture, and now it's, I guess, Angle and more Sting/Flair/Hogan stuff. So it's just weird. It seemed like they were getting behind them a few months ago, but oh well. Lost to Bully Ray. Thoughts on the match?
I gotta tell you, Eric, I'm so confused right now on what they're doing with him, and it's sad because I actually like him. You know,
seems like
I really
too.
do. I just don't get why you turn the guy face heel. It's so confusing, and I like the match. But it's like the feeling is not there because, like, why is he in this match? Like, Anderson shouldn't even be in this match right now. It's so hard to watch him now because he's getting buried badly. It's like he left WWE for this reason, and now TNA is just doing it to him. I mean, I love Bully Ray's character. It's a great character, and I'm loving it. Mr. Anderson was the wrong guy to do it to, especially as a two-time heavyweight champion. And Bully Ray makes him look like a wuss. It really does, and it scares me to think on why TNA is doing this or why even Anderson's even allowing it. It sucks. It really does. And I don't get it. I just don't get it. I'm sorry to say. For all you fans, it doesn't make any sense what they're doing with him right now.
Forget that Angle. You could say, I don't get it to TNA in general.
Yes. Something I can, but this one's just like, oh, my God. It's like if you skip 2 weeks, he'll be turning a face. I mean, right? I mean, if you skip 2 weeks of wrestling on TNA Impact or Impact Wrestling or whatever, he automatically is going to be a face now. It's like, oh, I don't know, man. I'm sorry. I've been.
Don't be sorry. It's not your fault because this
you
shit.
didn't book it.
Well, certainly not. This shit is just outrageous. But let's move on to the tag title match, Corey. Beer Money successfully defending against Hernandez and Anarchia. And what I noticed about this when we were preparing for the show was, well, they're doing stuff right now with Jeff Jarrett as the AAA Mega Heavyweight Champion and that cross-promotion there. And I thought it's funny how TNA is doing this right now. And they've had a relationship with AAA for a while now, so it's not totally new. But I don't think they've ever done it to this level. But it's funny that they're doing it at the same time now that WWE in the past 30 days has had two Mexican-American heavyweight champions, or WWE champion. Right now, Alberto Del Rio's the champion. We'll talk about that later. But it seems like they're both trying to get into the Mexican market. And we've mentioned on the show before how WWE is kicking CMLL or EMLL, same difference. It's like the NWA, WCW thing. Same name, same company, different name, same company, you know what I mean. So CMLL and AAA's ass is being beaten in their own home country by WWE, so it seems like the American companies are trying to appeal to the Mexican demographic more, and that's just the comparison I thought of when I was writing down this match for the show. But anyway, your thoughts on the tag title match itself?
Yeah, I think this is TNA's weak attempt to keep up with WWE with the Mexican fans. And
they've been doing this for years, though. That's why I pointed that out. It's not like, they're pushing Alberto Del Rio, let's copy it. They've been having a relationship with Mexican promotions for a while. Years, in fact.
They were scaling back on that a little bit for about 2 or 3 years. And then they brought it back. And they could be doing an awful lot better job at it. Beer Money won, which I was happy about because I don't like Mexican America. I think they suck. I think Hernandez is the only gem in this entire issue because Anarquia cannot possibly wrestle. I can't believe he came from OVW. He sucks. This is a storyline that's ran its course. The whole, we're Mexicans, we're better than all of you, that racist bullshit, that needs to stop. It does not work, especially not with the Florida crowd.
Well, don't you think it's more like just a retread of LAX anyway?
It's a very poor retread of LAX. Very, very poor. At least LAX was like, hey, we're just trying to get an equal spot on the roster. Some of the promos that these people have cut have been absolutely
come on.
racist.
If Homicide was doing this right now, I don't think he'd have a problem with it. Maybe it's just because Anarquia sucked. But Conan and Homicide and LAX were saying pretty much the same shit back then.
I wasn't really comfortable with Conan doing it either, but these people take it to the next level. At the very least, you have 5 sentences out of Homicide before he says something involving the word gringo. These people, you don't even...
Which is probably the only word you understood anyway.
This group, though, they don't even get one sentence in without bashing white people and Americans in general, and I've never been a fan of racist storylines like this. This just
So would you say that's cheap Latino heat?
Very cheap Latino heat, yes. Yes, and it just comes across as lousy.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people think that the potential Sting-Hogan match is going to be lousy. I can't disagree with that, but before we even get to that, let's see the setup, because in the main event, the world champion Sting lost the belt to Kurt Angle thanks to a chair that Hulk Hogan provided. So it seems like they're going to go in different directions from here on. But all the same, how do you think that whole angle turned about, Will Vafides, with Sting, Angle, and Hogan?
It was great. It got me points. It was excellent. How can I not enjoy that? Kurt Angle turning heel, again, does not make any sense to me at all. He's about to join Immortal with Jeff Jarrett, who he just feuded for 6 months. Oh,
well, do you think it's leading more towards him joining Immortal as opposed to just being a straight-out heel?
He's aligned himself with Hulk Hogan on Impact last week. So if that does not show that he's joining Immortal, then I don't know what does. And if he and Jeff Jarrett hug or do anything in the ring, that 6-month build and all that was worthless.
Which is kind of like what Triple H did with Austin in the 2-man power trip that was just posted on our Facebook. And looking back at that, that was just so fucking obvious. Triple H sticking himself in some hot act that made no sense.
But at least that was a little more believable. They were taking down all the talents that were, the threat to them.
But it wasn't believable for the same reasons you're saying Angle and Jarrett isn't believable, because they had 6 months of heated feud. Austin got run over by someone Triple H paid off, and then he tried killing him in return. It didn't make sense. And Jarrett and Angle won't make sense.
Yeah, well, the problem is there's a real-life storyline to it. It's not a
cartoon Angle.
Anybody could have ran over Stone Cold. Okay, they could have picked anybody because there was no face shown. When it's Karen Angle going out with Jeff Jarrett, you can't fake that. It happened and it's real. And Kurt Angle.
Well, you could fake it, but it just so happened to be based on something real.
Yeah. So it was based on something, and I think they just needed him to be a heel to go against Crimson. That's the only reason why they did this, and they need Crimson to look strong, and that's why they did Angle as a heel, only to make Crimson look good, which is. In the end, if he wins, which is right for business anyway, but still, it has to make a little more sense in the way it went down. I mean, the match wasn't that great between them and Sting. I mean, it's pretty clear they're going separate directions now with Sting and Hogan, Crimson and Kurt Angle. They're definitely heading towards Bound for Glory, which they have really done very well, I have to say. TNA has promoted Bound for Glory extremely well. They've been talking about Bound for Glory since, God knows how long now, a couple months.
Well, yeah, they've had a lot of build with the Bound for Glory series.
It was a good idea, though. I mean, at least they're putting in people's heads. There's a pay-per-view coming up called Bound for Glory. It's their WrestleMania.
Sure, it's like the Rumble winner getting a spot at WrestleMania.
Yeah, exactly. And they built this up a lot longer than that. So it's good for that reason. But like I said, some of these heel turns or face turns, they got to make sense, and a lot of them have not been making sense. But I got a lot of points on the show.
And we'll get to some more of the Battle of the Wills points after SummerSlam in a bit. You people are talking about the Yapapai Indian strap match in the chat room. Amazing. Amato in San Antonio, Texas.
Actually, looking back at the last couple of WrestleMania main events, and I did actually attend WrestleMania 26 in Phoenix, and I noticed that ever since they stopped doing the whole blood thing, that the main events that don't end with blood, like He Who We Do Not Speak Of making Triple H bloody tap out, or Batista beating up bloody Triple H, it doesn't have that WrestleMania feel to it, and I just want to know about your thoughts about that.
Well, blood's been brought up a lot with the whole PG era, especially when they do gimmick pay-per-views like multiple Hell in a Cells, and this cage match needs blood and blah, blah, blah. Well, what's the cage match that everyone says is the best in WWF history? Brett and Owen from SummerSlam 94, not a drop of blood. And yes, it can be useful, maybe even necessary in some instances. For instance, Undertaker Brock Hell in a Cell, the first Hell in a Cell with Undertaker Michaels, Austin and Brett. There can be instances where it is perfect for the storyline, useful for the storyline, maybe even necessary, but I don't think it's as necessary as people think. I'm not even queasy about it. It's just I don't see why people feel the need for people, yes, you must cut your head open with a razor blade to make this worthwhile. This has to happen. What do you think, Will Buffetas? Is blood more needed in WWE right now, or are we okay without it? Because, hey, that Punk Cena match this year, that was probably the best match they've had. And even Triple H Undertaker at WrestleMania, no blood. Michaels Undertaker, people were talking about that at WrestleMania, best match in for fucking forever, no blood.
How often do we even get blood back in the 80s and 90s before ECW came along? It was a very small instance where it would come up. For the well-being of the wrestlers and the business itself, we don't need it. It's not necessary. It's like if people get in a real fight, they get bruised on their face, but they really don't get bloody. Bloody is when you take a barbed wire to someone's head. But a chair shot is not going to make you bleed. And I've taken chair shots. I would never bleed from a chair shot. Bottom line. That doesn't make it real. If someone took a nail and put it across my head, I'm going to bleed. Blood is not necessary in wrestling. You can get out of that. You can go away with it. That's why you can wrap your leg up with, like, tape, or you can wrap your chest up to make you believe that you're hurt in other areas or use other body parts instead of using the head, especially when it's a vulnerable part.
But would you say it has its place, though?
It does. It depends. It depends
a time
on
and a
when.
place?
It's a time and a place for it. Like, if you were in a Hell in a Cell, right, and you're rubbing someone's face on a cage, I could see that possibly affecting. It uses the cage as a weapon.
What about Eddie Guerrero and JBL at Judgment Day? How else would that fucking JBL match be watchable?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a point of that. It likes to be used depending on the situation. If it was a Hell in a Cell, absolutely. If it was just a chair or ladder match, it doesn't really need it because the ladder or chair could never really probably do that. So that's where it makes sense. It has to make sense in the situation that they're in.
As usual, seems like everything's conditional. There are exceptions to every rule. Every rule can be bended and broken if there are any fucking rules. But anyway, let's move on to Ring of Honor, who had their first taping for Sinclair Broadcasting in Chicago Ridge's Frontier Fieldhouse this past Saturday. I heard there were multiple Wrestling Roundtable shirts running around, Corey, and I'm very aware that you were one of them, so let's see how it went. Let's talk about some of the bigger matches, though, because in between waiting and production problems, they did tape some big matches for their broadcast in September starting. So one of the big matches first was the World Tag Team Champions Wrestling's greatest tag team of Haas and Benjamin defeating the Kings of Wrestling. Now, everyone was pretty much approaching this like it was the Kings of Wrestling's last match in Ring of Honor. It's more or less a formality that they're leaving. So how do you think that their last match went? At least they went out against the tag champs.
This match was really great, and they made no allusions to whether or not they were leaving. I don't really know if they even addressed that, because certainly it didn't come up during the show portion. The match was really good. It was great to see their new ring gear. They have a matching set now where Sarah and Hero and Claudio all come out in red pants with the little Kings of Wrestling logo. I thought that was great. The match was really great, very, very technical, lots of high spots, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this parlays onto television.
Jimmy Jacobs had his in-ring return for Ring of Honor. He's been back doing the angle with Steve Corino as heels trying to rehab themselves, essentially. And Jimmy Jacobs has been an interesting character on camera. He's always come up with interesting, creative stuff, if nothing else. But he went up against the prodigy Mike Bennett, who I am a fan of. How was his in-ring return to Ring of Honor, which was a loss to the prodigy?
It was a lot shorter than I thought it was going to be. I thought that there were going to be a few more spots where Jacobs would do something more dangerous. But outside of that, this was a good match. And I like Jacobs' new ring gear. The white and blue is the same outfit he wore for AAW. And it's a wonderful thing to see him back in Ring of Honor. I think he's a perfect fit, and I'm glad that he came in just in time for the TV tapings.
Moving on to the TV tapings, speaking of TV, the TV champion El Generico, and I believe was a surprise to a lot of people, lost the TV title to Jay Lethal. Jay Lethal just returning to the promotion, and now he's won a title. So I'm sure you were surprised, Corey. How did the match go, and what's your reaction?
This was a shocking match, and I can't wait to see it again on television. There were a lot of surprises in this match, lots and lots of high spots. Right off the bat, Jay Lethal started to get at El Generico's weaknesses with an inverted surfboard, which you guys have got to see when this comes to television or ROHWrestling.com. This was a fantastic match. The crowd was super loud for this. People were on their feet for the whole match. This was excellent.
Speaking of champions, moving on, the champion Davey Richards, after touring Europe, matched up against Roderick Strong, a rematch, as these two have had many battles. So how did that one go between the American Wolf and the man representing the House of Truth?
This match was awesome. Very, very technical. Davey did a lot of catch-as-catch-can moves, which I love watching him do. He's got this awesome new outfit where it's silver and it's got like this mirror sheen to it. Davey and Roderick just went at each other. There was no way you could tell who was going to win this match. And it was awesome. The crowd was just loud for this. So I can't wait to see this again on television.
The Briscoes and the All Night Express of Kenny King and Red Titus had a blood feud going on a few months ago, and now it's kind of reignited here on broadcast TV in a standard tag match, I believe. So how did the Briscoes and ANX matching up once again go?
This match was on fire from start to finish. Just the two teams went at it, and this is another match where you could not tell who was going to win this. I love this one area where Rhett almost threw Jay onto the commentary tables. Jay holds onto the ropes, and the commentators stand up, and they start pushing Jay back in the ring like, don't you dare, don't you even fall on us, no. So I can't wait to see this on TV again. It was so exciting.
The last match of the night was Eddie Edwards against Michael Elgin. Elgin's a guy that has, to me, visibly grown in the past year. He's really stepped it up, especially when he was in the main event in Richmond, Virginia, in the event that I announced, which is actually available on ROHWrestling.com now. That was in a tag match, though. How did he handle himself in the singles against the former champ Eddie Edwards?
He handled himself really well. Eddie wins with a flip pile driver, but this is an incredible match. These two just went at it, and for a little while it looked like Elgin was going to win. And then Eddie just out of nowhere gets the second wind, and he just nails him with this move. This was a really good match. There's so much potential in Elgin, and I just cannot wait to see how this looks on television, because live, this was incredible.
As long as the tapings were, and people were saying how long the shows were, Corey, it didn't even go the latest in the Midwest that weekend compared to JCW, which aired starting at like 2-something in the morning out of Michigan, I believe. Their iPay-per-view with all the old legends with like Greg Valentine and Tito Santana in a 3-minute cage match. I just saw some pictures of it today. It looked unbelievably bad, except Bob Backlund. Bob Backlund looked incredible, but also incredible to me is just thinking how, man, one night Kevin Nash is at a Juggalo show at 4 in the morning doing JWO bullshit, and then he's flying to Los Angeles for SummerSlam the next day. Just That's how wrestling goes. So let's move on to SummerSlam right now. And, Will, for Battle of the Wills, we didn't have a lot to go on as far as the announced card, but no surprise, we got some unannounced match at the beginning. And that was Kofi Kingston, Rey Mysterio, and John Morrison defeating Alberto Del Rio, R-Truth, and The Miz. How was the opener 6-man?
I liked it. I liked the surprise match. It wasn't necessary to announce this one. I mean, I like the little surprise. It's always good sometimes. That's what a pay-per-view's all about sometimes. You get, like, a little surprise. I mean, you are paying for it. You knew Miz was going to have a match somehow, and R-Truth was going to have it. So why not put the best 3 heels on Raw against the best 3 babyfaces on, or 3 with the best babyfaces on Raw? So I thought it was a good opener. It made the crowd really get into it. These are 6 great workers at the company, so why not? It's a great opener for the show.
From there, we moved on to some of the matches that were already announced, and that was Mark Henry defeating Sheamus by countout. I can't believe in the Battle of the Wills that you guys didn't pick a more, let's say, non-finish ending, because Mark Henry, of course, is in the midst of this renewed push as he gets every few years, taking out the Big Show and Kane and Johnny Curtis or whatever. And Sheamus is just freshly turned face, so I'm not surprised that it was undecisive, as I guess they didn't want to put one guy over the other. They got to protect them. So, Corey, how was the Sheamus-Mark Henry match that ended by countout? Mark Henry wins.
I'm surprised that Mark Henry did better in this match than he has his whole fucking career, because usually I dread when Donkey Kong comes out to the ring. But this was
You just called him Donkey Kong, and you were complaining about racist shit TNA was doing before?
Look at how he stands, and it's okay, I'm a quarter black. But the way this match went,
Ebony's Woman of the Year, Corey Underhake.
Thank you. The way this match went, though, I'm surprised he did this well. He has not done this well in many, many years, but this is not a new push for him. It's not even new ring gear for him. We've seen Mark Henry as a heel. We've seen him do this whole, yeah, I'm a man, kind of shit before. Enough is enough. Stop. Send him home. Retire. Go away.
Well, I don't think that's going to happen if it's been going on since 1996, Corey. I think it would have ended by now if they wanted it to end. But surprised that Beth Phoenix did not get the belt because she's fucking the hottest thing in wrestling right now. You'd think they'd put CM Punk's girlfriend over here, but no. Kelly's still the Divas champion, and don't take that the wrong way. I'm a big fan of Beth Phoenix. She's a great women's wrestler, and regardless of whatever personal relationship she might have, if she had won, I think she would have deserved it on her own, regardless of anything like that. So I don't think it's someone getting favors necessarily. But that being said, I think a lot of people were surprised Beth Phoenix didn't get the title. She just got this renewed heel push that... Could you really believe Kelly beating Beth Phoenix just on paper? How was it on pay-per-view, Will?
Me and Birthday Brooks both thought that Beth Phoenix was definitely going to win that match. I like a surprise. It's been the best Diva match in a while. So I have to give credit. Both girls did a good job. Even Kelly more so because she's obviously the newer style to the ring. I like the roll-up. That was actually kind of surprising. So I thought that was a good reversal. This was a Divas match where I watched and I stayed, and I was like, wow, this is actually not a bad match. This is not a match where I'm bored, and I have interest, and I can't wait to see him go further. Hopefully they add some more elements to this.
I can't imagine how Corey reacted to the man who holds the briefcase of Money in the Bank, Daniel Bryan, losing to Wade Barrett. I have an idea what she thought about it, but let me just say before I let you talk, Corey, that is this not a case of taking a step backward to take more steps forward? Because Bryan has the briefcase. Not to say that he wouldn't be the first guy to lose it. Certainly possible. No one's lost it yet who has the briefcase. Even if they don't put the belt on him, just having the briefcase alone is keeping him in a prominent spotlight. So, in that sense, didn't Wade Barrett need the win more than Danielson does?
Well, first and foremost, his feud with Barrett has a lot of potential, so I'm not willing to give up on this just yet. Second, I would appreciate it if WWE.com had not started the rumor of, will Bryan bankrupt his chances? Which I actually did catch a screen cap of them doing this. I would also appreciate it if more people would stop bringing up Ken Anderson and how he lost his briefcase to Edge. Who knows?
Well, he didn't get to cash it in. The point I was trying to make was that Danielson could possibly be the first person to cash it in and lose, which no one has done yet. So I didn't mean necessarily Anderson losing the briefcase because it wasn't him actually utilizing it for its purpose. Now, even them saying that, though, isn't that just fucking with people just like you who are going to panic now and get that doubt in your head?
Yep.
No, I don't have that doubt, actually. It's way too early to say whether or not he'll lose it because he said he'll cash it in at WrestleMania. Well, we're just now past SummerSlam. I don't even know who the fuck's going to hold the belt come WrestleMania.
I'm sure they don't either.
Exactly. So it's a little too early to say if he's going to win or lose. Now, if it's The Undertaker, then, yeah, his chances don't look that great, even though The Undertaker's a cripple at this point. I think it's a little too early.
Undertaker's not even a factor in any of this.
I'm just saying what if. It's a little early to say. As for the match was okay. Could have been a little bit better. I wasn't a fan of the finish. I think Wade Barrett needs a different finishing move. I think this would be a good point for him to learn something brand new. Like, say, a submission. I think Barrett would do better with a submission instead of just, let me dump you on your head.
All right, well, I've read a lot of mixed reviews for Orton Christian. Some people saying that it's the best match they've ever had. Other people underwhelmed, especially that they did the same crossbody counter into a RKO spot. But let's see what you guys think. Orton and Christian, number 75, this time a no-holds-barred match, and Orton wins back the World Heavyweight Championship. Wilva Fides.
Edge came out right in the beginning of this match, which added an element to the match. Even though he didn't stay out there, he did the 5-minute thing. It shows that Edge might be involved a little bit more into Christian's whole thing. So don't be surprised if Edge actually was never really hurt and they used a storyline out of this. I wouldn't be shocked. Just by the way that came off, don't be shocked if this was a storyline all along, to have Edge versus Christian. I'm just throwing it out there. I'm starting a rumor right now. Everyone is now blogging about it. The match itself was good. I think Orton looked great. I think it showed his persona as his little crazy mentality look. I thought the ending was good with the steel chair. That looked really good. I thought it was another great match for them. They really don't have bad matches. I can't really complain about the feud because every match they've had is good. I really can't complain about it. I thought it was another solid match from both guys. These guys are two good workers. Why split up two good workers that can work well?
Edge not being really hurt might rank up there with the screw job was a work. But, Corey, let's see what you think about Orton and Christian.
This was...
She hates it.
Yes, I do. This was a boring match.
I know you do.
It was slow. It was very slow. This is the second pay-per-view in a row where they've had a slow match. It was great that they brought in some weaponry, but we've seen it. This feud is done now. It's done, and I do not like the fact that Randy Orton got his 9th belt. Why do you put the belt on a man who is perpetually psycho? The man suffers from IED. He's got a terrible attitude problem. He acts like a heel.
What's IED?
It's this weird disease that Mike Tyson has. Usually it's a side effect if you've done oopsies steroids. Randy has it. He's brought it up himself in interviews. That means it's time to send his ass home the way they sent Mike Tyson home. This guy cannot wrestle. He's not as good as his father. He's not even as good as his uncle Barry O, for God's sakes. Send him home. Stop putting the belt on him. He can't talk.
Wow. We really are keeping it positive, aren't we? Although if Orton ends up on a rooftop raising pigeons, that would be a pretty interesting term for his character. But let's move on to the main event, which was really WWE Champion Cena against Punk, who just happened to hold a belt. It's kind of like the Shawn Michaels Razor Ramon situation. Razor's the real champ, but Michaels never lost it, so he's carrying around a belt. Not technically the champ, but Punk won the belt back before Kevin Nash came in and helpfully clotheslined CM Punk, setting up Alberto Del Rio to finally cash in his briefcase. I thought it was a pretty funny running gimmick of Alberto Del Rio going to use it and always getting fucked and then running away before he could actually lose it. And now he's really the first Mexican WWE champion. Eddie and Rey are both American-born, Mexican-Americans, but actually from Mexico, Alberto Del Rio, the 4th Latino champion, but first from Mexico. So that was pretty neat that he finally got it, because people, I think, really forgot that Del Rio was kind of in the mix, because I guess with the Punk Cena focus and Triple H getting added into the mix, people forgot about Del Rio, but he got it, so I thought that was pretty cool. So what did you think of the match and the subsequent fallout, Will Vafides?
The match itself, you're not going to get Money in the Bank. There's no way you're going to get lightning in the bottle at SummerSlam. However, their match was still another 4-star quality match. Again, both guys looked real good in the match. Both guys had equal time to get over the other. Triple H, to my surprise, did not do anything in the match. He basically said what he was going to do. And then, of course, here comes big man Kevin Nash, who I saw at the Royal Rumble. Definitely shocked everybody. I cannot tell if many people could know that was going to happen. For a guy who ordered SummerSlam, I was very happy with the overall show. And again, points are good for me. Going forward now, they really stepped it up. SummerSlam looked like the biggest show of the year. It really felt like that way. At first I had my doubts, but after having the show and watching it, I think they definitely delivered. And it definitely added an element of surprise. This is why you got to order a pay-per-view to watch something like this, because why would you do this on Raw? Why not make people pay for this kind of a big surprise or swerve? So I loved it. I thought the match was good. I think a lot of intrigue. The last 10 minutes of the match was worth the pay-per-view all by itself.
What are the point standings now in the Battle of the Wills after these last two pay-per-views?
Well, for HardCORE Justice, Will Brooks got 5 points and 10 points. He got 3 points for his defense. He now has a total of 29. For me, HardCORE Justice, I got 14 points, and I got 11 points for SummerSlam, which now gives me a total of 18 points. So I caught up tremendously from a 14-7 deficit. I'm doing pretty well. I'm catching right back up, and like I said, I got half TNA, half WWE, and Brooks has all basically WWE guys. He messed up. The birthday boy's out right now. He's not even here tonight, and I'm disappointed in Mr. Brooks for not joining us on his birthday because he thinks his birthday is more important than Wrestling Roundtable. I'm sorry about that, Eric. I really am. I thought he would be more of a man, but he obviously isn't.
Will Brooks is here, actually.
Oh, well, then screw him anyway.
Really?
Bro, I don't even...
Really? You were talking all this smack about me because I wasn't here and I was here. Let me tell you something right now, man. The only reason you came back is you had nowhere to go but up. Okay, your team is ass. You know it. You picked a shit team. You got lucky on like Angle beating Sting, which made no sense. And another thing,
he won the championship. It made perfect sense.
Yeah, it made no sense. You should have never taken off Sting after that short of time and put on Angle. For what reason? Angle's not being built for anything. No point.
Let's talk about Raw real quick, Will Brooks, because as Don on our message board pointed out, I just mentioned Alberto Del Rio winning the belt. There were 6 WWE champions in 30 days between July 16th and August 14th. Alberto Del Rio's the champion now, a lot of hot-shotting the title, but on Raw, which you're in the chat room every Monday night for, they pretty much set the seeds for an angle going forward, though. Looks like Del Rio is going to go in another direction with Cena, but Nash and Punk did a promo together, and they set up a storyline with Triple H and texting and Stephanie and blah, blah, blah. I thought the segment was really rather boring. I was very underwhelmed by Kevin Nash's lack of fire and delivery. So we only have a couple minutes left. Briefly, your thoughts on the angle with Punk and Nash, and are you interested in WWE going forward into the fall? Because football season is going to start, and they certainly don't want to lose out on the fans that they gained back with the Summer of Punk angle they've done. The rating went up this week from the previous week, so they did okay, but can they keep up the interest?
Not anymore. It's the second year in a row. WWF had a great angle going into SummerSlam, and with one fell swoop, they fucked it up. Last year was Nexus. This year was CM Punk, and they both managed to kill both angles and all steam they had all going after SummerSlam. Like you said, a Nash Punk promo, even though it was the best of all like 6 promos they had on Raw, it still was all that great. And I don't want to see a fucking Punk-Nash match, okay? I didn't want to see Nash wrestle since 2000, okay? I don't want to see it now, especially now that he's just finally became a senior citizen recently. Okay, it's not interesting. It's not going to be entertaining. I don't care. I don't want to say they killed Punk already, but they pretty much killed a lot of his steam that he had going in.
All right, well, we're almost out of time, and I said at the beginning of the show that I had an announcement. It's not so much an announcement, but an update, really. This could possibly be our last radio show. Don't want to let the cat out of the bag necessarily just yet, but I want to let everyone know that we are currently in, let's call it, preliminary negotiations with several different entities about possibly taking the Wrestling Roundtable to another level, possibly being broadcast somewhere else. And that might not include the Roundtable radio show we're doing right now. Don't know yet. Not set in stone. Nothing's set in stone, but I just wanted to give everyone a heads up just in case. But we will keep you updated on WrestlingRoundtable.com. No matter what, WrestlingRoundtable.com, our message board, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all that other stuff, all that's going to remain open. That's not going anywhere. We'll always be there for the fans. But I just wanted to let you know that. And if this is indeed our last radio show for the time being, I seriously doubt it'll be the last show ever. Hell, we could be back in a couple weeks for all I know. But I just wanted to put that out there just in case. Stay tuned for WrestlingRoundtable.com to keep up to date. And we'll let you know whatever we can as soon as we can. And if it is the last for a little while, thanks a lot for listening. I think we've had a lot of great shows and a lot of great callers from all over the world, so thanks a lot. So for the panel of Rodney LeConte, Will Brooks, Will Vafides, Coriander Ake, I'm the host, Eric Santamaria. Please stay tuned with the show. Keep up with the show. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, even still on MySpace. Go Fight Live, the message board. Go to WrestlingRoundtable.com, and we're going to keep doing shows for you because we are the Wrestling Roundtable, and so are you.